Hello and welcome to the third annual Veteran of the Year Award Luncheon. Hopefully you're eating something because we're not here together like we are in years past. My name is Bridget Altenburg and I'm the President and CEO of National Able Network. I'm also an Army veteran. We started this event 3 years ago to support our Veterans Forward program, which connects job-seeking veterans to employers. We wanted employers to see what we see every day, the value that veterans bring to any workforce. As we began planning for this year's event, obviously, things changed a little. But I took some time to think about the veterans that we've honored in the last couple of events and how their work speaks to the servant leadership at the core of being a veteran. The first Veteran of the Year went to Eli and Nick. Eli was an Army psychological operations soldier who returned to the south side of Chicago to start Leave No Veteran Behind, a nonprofit that provides transitional jobs to veterans. Those veterans also provide safe passage to neighborhood schools, so serving veterans and the communities that they live in. Nick Montillo is a combat injured veteran who worked with Braveheart. This is an organization that provides horse therapy to veterans with post-traumatic stress. Eventually, he became a volunteer leader and logged over 2,500 hours in a single year. I'm gonna wait while you do the math. I'm going to wait a little longer because I think we have Marines in the audience. So, all right, we're good. Last year, we recognized Emily Miller. She's an Army engineer like myself. When she was in Afghanistan, unfortunately, she shattered her leg falling out of a helicopter. After she got medically retired from the military, she went on to start Rumi Spice, a company that brings Afghan saffron to market. Today, they're the largest employer of women in Afghanistan. As you can see, every year we choose veterans who are actively serving their communities in some way and continuing that tradition of service that they learn in the military. And this year's no different. This year, to me, I don't know if it felt like this to you, but 2020 feels like about 10 years. It didn't surprise me at all that this year, of all years when so much is going on, we saw 3 veterans who stepped up to serve their communities in so many different ways. Because service is what draws many of us to the military. We spend our careers in the military serving others, and it just seems natural that veterans will find themselves giving back when they leave the military. We've dealt with so much at the beginning of 2020. Do you remember when the Australian fires, we thought that would be the defining disaster of the year? Instead, here we are, dealing with a pandemic that has hit our country so hard, but it's hit the most vulnerable the hardest. And we have another reminder that our country has never fully tackled the injustices and inequalities this country was founded on. We know how to defeat the disease. We know how to recover from recessions. And we're finally doing the work to start taking down the racist systems that continue to cause harm. I have no doubt that veterans like the people we're here to honor today will be helping lead our country forward and help our communities find better times. Today, we're here to honor 3 people, 3 veterans who have stood up for what's right, lifted a hand to those around them, or paved the way for much needed change. I'm really excited to share the Veteran of the Year Award with our 3 winners. Our Veteran of the Year is Andrea Goldstein. We don't hold it against her. She's a Navy officer. It's okay. She's still a great Veteran of the Year. She served on active duty from 2010 to 2016 and was just promoted to Lieutenant Commander in the Navy Reserve. Andrea's been a vocal advocate for women and survivors of military sexual trauma. I'm really excited to congratulate Andrea Goldstein.
Well, thank you so much. I'm profoundly grateful and honored to be considered and to accept this award. I really appreciate all that you do in your continued service and your organization's service. And I just want to share with everyone that service does not stop the day that you leave the military. And something that I always think about is that last thing that I did. I don't want that to be the best thing that I ever did, the most impactful. There's always more, and there's so much joy in serving others. And I'm profoundly grateful to be here and share that. And hope I can share that with others as well.
Our Veteran of the Year is Mary Tobin. Mary is an Army veteran with 2 combat tours in Iraq. She's the Executive Director of the East Region for Mission Continues, a veteran-focused nonprofit that deploys veterans to community service roles. She's a leader in diversity and inclusion and has been recognized in publications like the CBS, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, among others. And she also mentors young Black officers as a co-founder of Do More Together, a nonprofit that helps engage and empower Black cadets to serve their communities. Mary is exactly the kind of person we need to help us lead our communities back together. Congratulations, Mary Tobin.
Oh, thank you so much, Bridget, for this amazing award. It is no secret that I am a fan and so inspired by the work that you do each and every day. And so I wanted to thank just a few people, and I wrote some stuff down. First, I'd like to thank God, my mama, of course, the Deep South that groomed me and raised me. And then I also want to thank the National Able Network for all the work that you do for veterans and the people in that community every single day. Without amazing public servants like yourself, this world will not be a better place, and you inspire me to be better at the work that I do every single day. I want to thank all of the soldiers that I've had the honor to lead and all of the leaders that I've had the mission to follow. Every unit, good and not so good, taught me some really valuable lessons of hard work, earning your people's trust every single day, and being committed to the mission. So even my failures have made me the leader that I am today. It goes without saying, my mother is the single most important influence in my life. She taught me pride in myself, especially as a Black woman. She taught me how to scrap, claw, fight, and pray my way out of every challenge. And her endless hope that things can and will get better is the spirit that drives me every day. And lastly, my gratitude is shaped in the love and belief that my JROTC instructor, a very, very white man by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Nicholas J. Burke, who decided that he was going to invest his time, his experience, and his love into Black kids every single day and show them that they have so much potential to change the world. He treated me like the leader I could be, and because of him, I strive every day to pay his kindness and his love forward. So on behalf of all the soldiers that I've led, the leaders who believed in me, my mama and Colonel Burke, thank you, National Able Network, for this amazing award.
Our Veteran of the Year is Fred Wellman. Fred is an Army veteran with 4 combat tours who retired as a lieutenant colonel. He's the senior advisor for veteran affairs at the Lincoln Project. And during the height of the pandemic in New York City, Fred drove up the East Coast and served as the chief of staff of the New York Presbyterian Field Hospital. I'm so excited to congratulate Fred Wellman.
Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it. What a wonderful moment. Thank you. First, I'm absolutely humbled by this, and I'm really humbled by being in the same company as Andrea Goldstein and Mary Tobin, 2 of the most present servant leaders in the community. When you told me I was one of 3, I was like, awesome. Who's there too? Okay, why am I in this group? So, thank you. I have to be honest. I think Bridget, when you called me and told me about this, I believe my reaction was, "Wait, what?" Because it's been a crazy year. I mean, I think for a lot of people, as you mentioned, the pandemic, it's been a rough year. And for me, as you know, if anyone who's followed me at all, I've been through a journey of my own with my PTSD journey, a long-term PTSD journey that led to its culmination this year with closing some chapters, and got that squared away just in time for a global pandemic, which, as you mentioned, found me in New York City with in the end, an absolute privilege to work with military operations, military veterans, special operations veterans who were manning a field hospital for the incredible New York Presbyterian system, which was humbling 6 weeks in New York. I came back and like many businessmen and like many people in our country, we faced a challenge. I did close my company of 10 years, which is right when Bridget got hold of me. I'm like, hey, I just closed my company. and then, but what it does though is it goes to exactly the mission of the National Able Network. Where this is an organization is about transition. It's an organization about skills. It's an organization about helping people find new directions as adults and the careers, especially veterans. And I'm that guy. I found myself at the ripe young age of 54, having to, as a grandpa, having to, pivot and find a new direction. And I've been very fortunate with many of the skills you teach and many of the abilities we have. But as a veteran especially, I had this great network of friends and partners of fellow veterans who reached out and wrapped their arms around me at a very difficult time, to include you, Bridget, and everyone you work with, to say, hey, we got your back. You're going to make it through this transition and go to greater things. And I'm just fortunate. I think this is the fourth or fifth time I've pivoted, and as you mentioned, I just had the good fortune to get an incredible offer from the Lincoln Project to participate in, and truly one of the most consequential elections in modern American history, a unique moment in the United States of America, and it culminates in this moment and this time. So thank you so much for this. I mean, I truly am humbled, especially with the year it's been. So thank you for this incredible opportunity.
This year, we wanted to have a discussion with the Veterans of the Year. We wanted to hear from them how they were led to community service work, how their path out of the military zigzagged, like so many of our paths out of the military, and how being veterans impacts their drive to serve in the community and serve at work. So I'm really excited to be able to have the discussion that probably many of you want to hear, because many of you had the same challenges. So here we are to hear from our Veterans of the Year, Fred, Mary, and Andrea. Andrea Goldstein, who is a Navy officer who served on active duty between 2010 and 2016, and so excited, she actually got promoted to Lieutenant Commander in the Navy Reserve last week, so huge. This is like a huge week for you. But one of the reasons that we are recognizing her today is because she's been such a vocal advocate for women and survivors of military sexual trauma, which we know is a continuing issue in the military. It's not an easy thing to talk about. It's not an easy thing to raise your hand and say, look, this is a problem and we gotta do something about it. So that kind of courage and doing the right thing and service to others really exemplifies what the Veteran of the Year is all about. All right, so tell us a little bit about the path that you took after, well, you didn't leave the military, but when you left active duty, what was the path that you took in the civilian world?
Absolutely. So I knew I wanted to get out to go to graduate school full time, and I felt it was very important to be leaving to be actively going towards something. I was really proud of my service. I enjoyed my time on active duty. But I was really excited to go to school full time and really explore how I could merge my military experience and my life experience and actively work on improving the world. I'm an intelligence officer, and intelligence officers spend a lot of time trying to prevent bad things from happening, as opposed to actively putting positive energy and work towards promoting good things for happening. So I applied to graduate school. I was accepted to the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy early, and left active duty about 6 months before I went to school. And I used all of my miles to go backpacking around the world for a couple of months. So I took a round the world trip to really decompress from a very dynamic, intense tour. Not everyone has the opportunity to do that, but I really highly recommend doing that. I mean, we get so few times in life where we can essentially take a gap year. And so that was what I did. I went to graduate school at Tufts full time for 2 years. I did an internship in the private sector. I was at Bank of America for a summer. And then my first job out of graduate school was as the chief executive officer of Service to School, which is a nonprofit that helps veterans achieve their full potential in accessing higher education. And I had always had these, I guess I would say, side hustles. It started way back in 2014 when I was still on active duty, and ended up by chance and a couple of Facebook connections being one of the first writers for Task and Purpose, which was just getting off the ground then. And I started by writing these personal essays, and which morphed into merging personal narrative with things I cared about, which happened to have policy implications. And so now I had this kind of side hustle in policy. My degree was policy focused, particularly focused on the identity of women veterans. And then this job on Capitol Hill looking for a policy expert on women veterans came up. So I ended up with the mythical unicorn of a job where I met 100% of the qualifications. And that brings me to where I am now.
She has 2 combat tours in Iraq. She's the executive director of the East Region for Mission Continues, which is a veteran-focused nonprofit that actually deploys veterans to community service roles. So they're all about serving their community. She's a leader in diversity and inclusion who's been recognized in publications like CBS, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, The Washington Post, among so many others. And she's just been a fantastic mentor to young Black officers and the co-founder of Do More Together, a nonprofit that helps engage and empower Black West Point cadets to serve their communities. Mary, tell us a little bit about the path that you took after you left the Army.
Right. So I found myself in the fall of 2011 getting my DD-214 and medical retirement papers. Now, I'm 31 at the time, and I'd planned on spending 30 years in the Army. I wanted to be the Black female version of Colin Powell. So when I was forced to medically retire, I was lost, completely lost. I was lost because I felt like I had no mission and no personal mission. Like, what do I do now? How do I know I'm doing the right thing in life? How do I know I'm serving people? And so one of my best friends stationed in the Air Force at Okinawa, said, Mary, come on out here, sit on the beach facing the East China Sea and figure your life out. So I had the honor of helping to raise my goddaughter and figure my life out. And coincidentally enough, I got an amazing opportunity to work supporting the Marines who were supporting tsunami cleanup in Japan. And that was the first exposure I had to the fact that I didn't have to be in the Army or the military to have this mission where I was still helping people, no matter where they were, and really serving others who needed help the most. And so the bug bit me. And coincidentally, I was a civilian Marine, and so they treated me just like I was a captain in the Army. So it wasn't really good for my transition because in my mind, I thought, I'm still a captain, and that's the way they treated me. But it also taught me about how leadership is universal no matter what organization you're in. That role led me back to DC, where I worked for HUD. Again, the volunteer bug bit me. Only this time I was working supporting homeless veterans. And it is through that volunteer work that I really got plugged into nonprofit networks, had a couple of executive director roles in nonprofit organizations, even worked as a chief operations officer for a public agency, a city agency, but still serving thousands of kids. And so every single role every opportunity that I was presented with was one where I got to serve others and I got to apply all of my leadership experience and lessons to. And so it was like I was building on those things. But I think most importantly, every role showed me that the things that I learned in the Army and the military still had value and organizations needed it. And so, I think for me going from devastated to now finding so much purpose and seeing how I can apply my skills and experiences, it's been a tremendous ride. It's been rocky, but leadership is rocky. But when you get the big wins, you win big and you see people's lives change. So I think, I'm really happy with how my journey's gone, but I tell you, it was not easy in the beginning.
So inspiring. During the height of the pandemic in New York City, Fred served as the chief of staff to the New York Presbyterian Field Hospital. So he drove from Virginia up the East Coast at the worst of the pandemic and led that field hospital in New York when they were really concerned that they were not going to have enough hospital beds and ICU beds at the worst part of the pandemic. So talk about somebody going into a burning building to make sure that he was doing what he could to make the pandemic better. Solving some problems with the pandemic in New York City, but really incredible work. Fred, tell us a little bit about the path that you took after you left the military.
I joke whenever I answer that question because I quit twice, and it only took the second time. I actually was in the Army for 13 years and landed Georgia in 1999, decided to get out at the 13-year mark, and found myself a good project management job. I joined the reserves last minute. 9/11 hit, went back in the Army because, I couldn't resist. So the second time when I retired, for me, it was about, one, I had a good plan to do what I wanted to do. I wanted to find work that segued out of what I've been doing. And so I started very early, like 90 days out from transition, to really start networking. leveraging what networks I have, being very public. I went on social media, said, hey, I'm getting out. Y'all need to help me out. And I was very fortunate. That worked. One of my Facebook friends, a military colleague, was at a party of all things. And a CEO said, yeah, I'm looking for a dude. He goes, oh, yeah, Fred Wellman just said he's getting out. And so my path from the military was clear. So I had a job for about a year, not a bad gig. Unfortunately, there were some challenges. The company I worked with, I ended up leaving / getting fired, depending who you talk to, and for the right reasons. And as I looked for a new gig, I realized as I interviewed a lot of companies, there wasn't a lot of veterans in the public relations. I'm a public relations guy for a living, and so I saw an opportunity. As I didn't get a job right away, I said, you know what? Somebody gave me advice to start my own company. And Scout Conf was born in the idea that there was not enough veterans and military service members in that public relations world, and therefore our voice was not being made clearly, and the impact that we could make wasn't clear. So Scout Conf was born in my basement 10 years ago out of that idea, and we ran a good, had a decade of really great work. As a benefit corporation, and so that's really why. So I ended up going from not wanting to be to an entrepreneur, and I'm on my second entrepreneurship iteration after that. So I took a kind of weird path.
What is it about that work that you do now and the community that you see yourself serving in terms of women veterans? What is it that really intrigues you about that work?
So there's a lot that's intriguing about the work, and there are two issues here. There's one that's the work is very intriguing, and then being a part of the community myself has certain aspects. And I'll actually start with the community. When I was working on my graduate school was actually, I went to an international relations school. And so the foundational work in my literature review was looking at, for example, militarized masculinities and militarized femininities and women in non-state armed groups like the FARC or Maoists, and demobilization, disarmament, and reintegration, which is the same thing as transition from active duty to veterans. We just think of it, conceptualize it differently in the international relations space with non-state armed groups. But a lot of the processes and challenges are the same. And I really wanted to put that in context of the fact that it seemed that women veterans didn't identify as veterans, or if they did, why weren't they actively participating in this space when serving is such a transformational experience, regardless of what kind of experience you have. And I had also personally found, and if it had not been for the Pat Tillman Foundation forcing me to show up in a room with 120 other veterans, I don't know if I would participate in the veteran space. That was the first time I felt really, really comfortable and included. And that gets to the other point, which is about the community. There are 2 million women veterans, and about 200, I believe it's 250,000 of them are currently serving on active duty. But you might be alone in your unit. Or you might be, for example, now I'm a lieutenant commander, and even then, like, I go back 10 years, and a lot of the time I was the most senior woman. And so even if you're not the only woman in a unit, you can't necessarily be friends with the other women who are there. And you might, if you're lucky, you do have good relationships with your male peers, but it's still not the same. You are never quite part of the brotherhood. And so there's this constant feeling of always being out of place, which was something that I found when I was doing my research. And then when it comes to doing, and I was speaking to all of these women who all felt so alone in these experiences that they had, whether they served in the 80s or there was a woman who I spoke to while she was on terminal leave, and then right after she got out, or right after, she'd been out for 3 months. And realizing that you have a shared experience with millions of women is healing. It is transformative, and there are actually protective mental health factors that go along with it, in creating these connections and having this community. And so that has been something that I didn't have when I was serving, and most women don't have when they're serving. That is unique in the veteran space, and there's still only corners of the veteran space too. Much of the veteran space is still very white male dominated, and so constantly trying to find ways to create those spaces and actively be part of those spaces has been a fundamental part of the work that I've been trying to do since leaving active duty.
Tell us a little bit about the work you do with Mission Continues and the community that you serve through Mission Continues.
Right. So I'm the proud executive director for the East region of the Mission Continues. That's 26 cities, 42 platoons or small operations. That's thousands of veteran volunteers that I have the honor of leading every single year, including Chicago. And so, essentially what we do is we train veterans who are, first we began with just post 9/11 veterans, but then we expanded it to all veterans because what we saw over time was that veterans have a sense of service and giving back to others that you kind of never lose. Even after you leave the military, I think what we do at the Mission Continues is that we present a model in which a veteran comes into a place of service, understanding that they have value and skills to give to these communities, and that these communities are already strong, they're already resilient. They just need that little extra push or that partnership that will help really make impact in the communities. And so we teach them things like cultural competency, right? How to understand the history of a community. We teach them how to develop partnerships and what it really means to work on impact projects together, especially those that address food insecurity, poverty, lack of education and or exposure to exercise and healthy activities for young people in the community. And so we get to really see veterans and their creativity blossom. And so we support and fund these projects all over the country. I have the honor of doing it in 26 cities and Puerto Rico, so that's fun. But right now we have shifted our major operational focus to food insecurity. There's so many veterans, families, civilians who are being dramatically impacted by what's happening with the pandemic, with COVID, as well as just many other economic changes. And so we have veterans in communities every single day, every single week, feeding hundreds and sometimes thousands of families. And so I'm really, really proud of the work that we do. And to see veterans just like connect back into their rank. Like you see guys who are real estate agents Monday through Friday turn into first sergeant and sergeant major on the weekends. And it is amazing to see how they just click right back into it and just really direct some amazing projects. And you'll hear veterans say, you know what? I'm glad to be treated like I'm still strong and not like I'm broken. And so I just have a wonderful time seeing that light turn on every weekend with these amazing veterans.
When you think about advice that you would give to an employer, perhaps unclear about the benefits of having veterans on their team, and sometimes even more, not just the benefits of having veterans on their team, but even this, negative stereotype that's completely untrue that, people are coming back from 19 years of war broken and they don't want to take a chance on people. And we hear that all the time from employers. What advice would you give employers about the benefits of having veterans on their team?
Yeah, the thing about being a soldier or service member, any service member, is what people don't realize, we do get training, but in many ways the training is built to allow you to adapt to situations. We train hard and we teach you your skill set, so the skills you learn are automatic, if you will, right? I used to tell my pilots, we did battle drills to where we were blue in the face, so that when bullets started flying, I never had to wonder where the guy to my right was going to be. He was just there, right? But the whole point of that is to prepare you for the unknown. Because the thing about combat, especially having been there a few times, is you cannot prepare for the unknown. So service members are incredibly prepared for being thrown to circumstances and adapting. It's adapting. Remember Semper Gumby, right? You learn to be flexible. And I think for me, with the veterans I've hired and the jobs I've had, and Larkin is a perfect example, is okay, well, what do I do here? What's the experience I have? What are the assets? We're good at saying, like we said earlier, right? what are my assets available to me? Who do I leverage to get the job done? And what I do. So I tell a lot of my fellow employers, and I say, hey, the thing about these guys is don't just look at what's in their resume and what they did. Figure out what they're going to do.
Right. The first thing I would say is you are getting a heck of a leader on your team. Regardless of skill, competency, or industry, you have someone who has a proven record of leadership. So pick a level. Pick a squad of 5 people. Pick a company of 200 people. Pick a brigade of 1,000 people or more. You have someone who has leadership experience that's been tried and true in crisis, in change, and in steady state operations, right? So if you're looking for an asset to your team who can manage that, then that is what you're getting. So full stop, without even going into a resume, you have a person whose experiences, leadership experiences, have been tested and they have stood the test of time.
So the number one element of that is that veterans are the most adaptive people you will ever meet, because you are very specifically trained and conditioned and you learn this through practice to figure it out. You might get some training, but you are thrown into an environment with a low degree of certainty and sometimes a low degree of agency, and still have to figure it out and succeed at the mission. Who better to have on your team than someone who is that resilient and adaptive? To the second point, whether or not we have military experience, everyone is grieving something. And yes, many veterans have these experiences that we can name, but there are people in your workforce who are dealing with their own traumas that may be unnamed, that they may not be fully aware of, and that perhaps you as an employer aren't fully aware of. And so I think it's important in general for employers to be empathetic to what their workforce is going through at any given time.
What advice would you give a service member who's about to leave the military and maybe doesn't think of themselves yet as the breaking down all of the assets and skills that you learn in the military that you forget, because you kind of learn everything by osmosis and then you forget you've learned all those things. So what advice would you give somebody that's about to leave the military?
Well, the number one thing I tell most of them is don't stay in your own head, right? I mean, the thing that saved me each time I've transitioned is, and the reason I got this job at the Lincoln Project is a perfect example, is find mentors, find those who have made the transition already, find outsiders who are going to be able to give you the advice and see you for what you don't see. I think too often I see kids stay at home, look at they're staring at that blank resume because they have to do a resume, and they're trying to list their assets, and it pays to have somebody like you and I who have been out for a while. So I always tell kids, go find a mentor, find some of the industry you want to go to, find out where you're going, and beyond that.
I want to transition a little bit and talk a little bit about the moment we are in time. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember, but in January, there were these terrible wildfires in Australia.
Yeah.
Doesn't that feel like it was 10 years ago?
I swear when I saw a commercial about the recovery efforts still going on, I was like, that wasn't 3 years ago? No, it was December and January.
Yeah. And I wonder if you can talk to me a little bit about how you want to talk about this. What do you want to share about this moment in time and the idea that you and I have talked about around servant leadership and the need for servant leadership in this particular crazy 2020 that we're all experiencing?
Right. I think, what we are seeing is this realization that we are all connected. We can't do this life without each other. And I think when we saw the wildfires in Australia, I found myself deeply emotional, concerned, all the things about this place that's thousands of miles away from me. And on the surface, I could easily write it off as, I'm in Atlanta doing my thing. That doesn't impact me. But I think what was so beautiful about some of the media accounts was how the second and third order effects and how it would impact the rest of the world. And I think people began to understand that as world events began to pile up. So, a potential war between the U.S. and Iran didn't just impact the U.S. and Iran. A pandemic or a disease that starts in Asia doesn't just impact Asia. And everyone's kind of figuring out that, unless we all get involved to try to solve these problems, they won't end. And I think everyone outside of military veterans are beginning to understand how important it is to not only work together, but to believe in one another and to really fight through the surface level differences we think we have and get to the core of the connectedness that we do have. So despite, I think, the pain and the hurt that we're feeling now, I feel hope, because I feel connected to people from all parts of the world, united in fighting issues like racism, fighting issues that affect the environment, trying to help economies recover. I feel connected to people all over the world now that I don't think I would have felt had we not, as a world, had to stop and focus and figure this out. And so while I'm worried and I'm concerned most days, I'm upset and I'm sad most days, because of everything that's happening. When I see people in New Zealand marching with Black Lives Matters flags, and I see folks in Eastern Europe, wearing a shirt that has a fist on it and saying we will end racism here too, it makes my heart overwhelmed, because now we're finally getting it. Humanity does not work without each other. We have to do this together.
When it comes to the aspect of servant leadership, you mentioned earlier that this is something that people are uncomfortable talking about. That's one of the key reasons that it has not been addressed. If you are a good leader, if you want to serve, you have to have these conversations about the absolutely talking about rape and murder, that's the situation we're in right now. There's nothing more uncomfortable than talking about that. But it must be addressed head on. And if you want your people to trust you, you must be actively talking about those issues that are on their mind, because they're certainly on yours. And I think the other thing is that I found in these spaces where, we're in this reckoning, but there is a tremendous amount of joy in organizing and in taking agency where it has been taken away from you in the past. And that is very powerful.
Wow. Yeah, we are at a uniquely definable moment in American history, in world history. Like you said, a global pandemic, an economic collapse that likely we haven't seen in this century, in a century or more, at least since the Great Depression. Certainly not the speed with which it collapsed. And then we're seeing the largest civil rights movement in American history, if you believe the numbers, one that crosses racial lines, that you see as many white and people of color marching together as you have ever before. And then, of course, we face a very challenging moment in our political history as we face our election. Right now, as we sit here, it's 3 years to the day of the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally. And I remember I had gotten knee replacement surgery that week, so I was at home laid up, as my son-in-law, who is a National Guard sergeant here in Virginia, was one of the soldiers deployed to Charlottesville to guard a statue to the leader of the Confederacy, which fell 150 years ago. And here I am sitting and thinking to myself, I face a moment where I am stuck here at home worrying about my son protecting a statue to a failed rebellion. Because white nationalists and neo-Nazis and actual Nazis want to show their power, that they still have a place in our society. And so we, of all types of leaders, need to step up and decide what are our values and what can we as leaders and as servants lead. And that's why I would go to COVID. When the call came to go to New York, I went to New York. And when the call came to go to the Lincoln Project, I agonized over it. Obviously, the Lincoln Project, where I am, if you follow politics, is a controversial organization. We are former Republicans who have taken up a battle to remove Mr. Trump and Trumpism, from our national conversation, which has caused ire on both sides of the political. My friends on the left think I'm suspicious. My friends on the right hate me. Here I'm in the middle going, hey, I'm just trying to help. But at the same time, I've also been given a national platform to have a voice I've never had before. I've been very vocal recently, if you follow the news, and we'll show this next month, about the Postal Service slows down. Sounds great, slow the Postal Service down. What's the big deal? Well, 1.2 billion prescriptions were delivered by the Postal Service last year. If those are delayed, what happens to that guy who goes off his antidepressants? What happens to that veteran who needs his medicine because he can't get it? VA can't send it early. And so these are the things that I can have a platform now to fight. So I think we as veterans, and again, that servant leader is so, I'm such a passionate believer in servant leadership. It was kind of funny. I actually did an interview with Alex Kack, who's, if you remember, the green shirt guy, if you remember, he has a blog, he has a podcast, and he interviewed me in March about that, and then we talked about servant leadership and how I feel that you need to step up in your community, that when the opportunity comes, that we, especially as veterans, need to say, okay, I have certain skills, or I have experience that will lay into this. We will be launching that with the Lincoln Project. I will be asking my fellow veterans to step up for our country. I want them to think about, Joshua Chamberlain, who charged downhill, bayonets fixed when Gettysburg was going to fall. On their left flank, Little Round Top, day 2 of Gettysburg, Georgia and Alabama Confederate regiments are attacking uphill. Joshua Chamberlain, the 20th Maine, ran out of ammo. They fixed bayonets and they charged downhill, which he would receive the Medal of Honor for later. We're at that moment.
Anything else that you that we didn't catch that you want to share?
I'll say this. Muhammad Ali has a saying, that service to others is the rent we pay for room here on earth. And I believe that no matter where you come from, no matter what your background is, that each of us owes a debt of service to each other. We don't work without each other. And everyone has a unique set of gifts and talents that no one else can do but you. And this world needs that. And so no matter how much success you achieve, no matter how many awards you get, no matter how much money you have in a bank, there is something that you are uniquely positioned to give to the world before you leave this earth, right? So I just want to challenge everybody to find that thing, be great at that thing, and to leave a legacy of everything that you are uniquely positioned to give to the world.
All three of you are so deserving of these awards. You've really inspired me and hopefully a lot of other people here today. I want to thank our sponsors, ComEd, BMO, Wintrust, and NICOR, for giving us the opportunity to share these awards with these inspirational people. Thanks to the team at Veterans Forward for helping hundreds of veterans every year navigate to the career that feeds their soul, like it does for Andrea, Fred, and Mary. If you want to support our work, please visit us at www.nationalable.org/vets. And finally, congratulations to these deserving winners of the Veteran of the Year Award, Andrea Goldstein, Fred Wellman, and Mary Tobin. Thank you so much.